Hello, I'm live and I'm here to talk about how to channel your creative muse. What do I mean when I say that? I mean, entering the state of flow for an artist where you feel like instead of making something from all the effort within you, you're actually just opening yourself up to be a vessel or a channel for a flow of inspiration to move through you and to make whatever wants to be made through you. And if you've ever had this experience, it's magical. And it's something that we can't force or even depend or rely on, but it is something that we can prepare ourselves to receive whenever those lucky moments of serendipity happen. And so I want to give you some tips for preparing yourself to receive these moments. And the more you prepare yourself and the more regularly you feel those creative flow moments, the more they will happen. So this is when like your actions and your awareness, that thinker in your head that's aware of what you're doing before you do it, that's thinking about what you did after you do it, those two things merge. And it's really just time slowing down. That's the perception of it. And it's I've heard it be called transient hypofrontality, when the frontal lobes of your brain like go kind of quiet and you hit into that alpha brainwave state, and things can just move and flow in a more meditative way rather than through a lot of conscious efforting. So I have 8 tips for you on how to get this feeling in your creative practice. My first tip is have a consistent, disciplined practice and an arsenal of tools and techniques. So if you show up regularly to the studio, to the canvas, to the volleyball court, whatever it is, and you are in the habit of showing up regardless of how you might be feeling in that particular moment, then you can kind of kickstart your creativity and that feeling of centeredness that we need in order to be creative by actually doing the thing, actually showing up and sitting at your desk to write, actually showing up and being in the studio to dance. That is just a huge part of it, is consistently showing up. And then you also want to have a bag full of tools and techniques. So if you're a painter, you need to have your easel and your canvas and your supplies. And the same goes for dance. Like, we need to have our techniques drilled. We need to have certain things mastered so that we don't have to think about them. It's very helpful to have like combinations that you like to do, certain movements that you like to do, certain gestures. And so you're not just creating something out of nothing every single time. You are using everything that you've learned and developed in your artistic practice when you are in the creative flow. And I just want to really quickly, before I give you the other tips, read a sort of poetic entry from this book called The Book of Qualities. And I will post a link in the comments with the name and the author. And I love this quote. It's just like a little poem about discipline and improvisation. So here's a short quote that I find inspiring in this topic. Discipline does not disappear forever, but she does take vacations from time to time. By nature, she is a conservative person, and yet she lives a radical life. Guided by a sense of inner necessity, she works hard and takes many risks. When Discipline was a teenager, too poor to afford dance class, she skipped lunch to pay for her lessons. Discipline has a strong sense of order. However, when things are too neat, she feels compelled to mess them up. She has a complex relationship to form. She appreciates the necessity and dangers of structure. She understands that the same structure which supports you can hold you back. The bones of the skeleton which support the body can become the bars of the cage which imprison the spirit. After Discipline has mastered a form, she is free to improvise. I think that's just a really beautiful perspective to personify discipline and show how when we do have a disciplined practice, it can actually lead to greater freedom as long as we recognize the dangers of that structure and clinging too closely to it. Okay, tip number 2 is to learn something new or study or follow whatever excites you. So I have a lot of experience in the genre of belly dance. And lately I've been exploring my voice a little bit more. And before that, a few years ago, I started to explore frame drum and and also improv comedy. So what I discovered is that when I was a novice, like a total beginner in these other disciplines, I felt like I wanted to make things. And I realized that sometimes it's easier to get in the zone of making something when you're not good at it yet, when you don't have a trained eye, because you're just like, the stakes are lower. You can't tell that what you're making is like far off from where you want to be. It's just like maybe the pressure's off a little bit because you're like, I don't know, this is just like something new I'm trying. And I found that like I wanted to sing songs, I wanted to make songs, I wanted to like make little jokes, I wanted to like make songs on my frame drum. And doing all of that in a more novice way helped me in my more professional artistic realm. It kind of opened me up. Even though I was creating in a different genre, my more familiar genre also became more comfortable to me and more free. So I suggest that you try something entirely new, like whatever really excites you. Like you hear something, you see something like, oh, I just really want to do that. Just go do it, because it is going to inform all the other practices that you do as well. And it's gonna just like open you up to being in like that beginner's position and just like being free with it. Tip number 3 is to witness other people's creativity. Be a witness to others who are sharing what they've created. I find that to be one of the most inspiring things, and I know that it can be kind of difficult right now while we're still isolated to go see performances, but you could certainly watch films from home. You know, you can listen to music that really truly moves you just, you know, from your speaker at home. Basically, you could read poems, you could read books, be engaged in consuming art that other people have made. And that is going to just like spark your creativity without much conscious effort at all. Tip number 4 is to experience awe. The feeling of awe, where you are aware of how small you are in the grand scheme of things. This could be going to a national park, going to Big Bend and seeing the rock formations, going to the redwoods and seeing the giant trees, going outside during a rainstorm, making sure to turn the TV down and listen to the thunder outside. I find that nature is a great way to get that awe experience, but it can also happen through like science. You know, you can be watching or listening to a podcast about the cosmos, the universe, something, you know, any new scientific discoveries, something that just puts you in a position of, wow, this world is so fantastic and mysterious, and I'm such a small part of it, and my life is so insignificant in comparison to these long cycles that we're a part of. I find that to be very helpful. And other than getting out into nature to find that, sometimes I try to invite that in just like a daily practice where I say a prayer. And, you know, prayer's not for everyone, but I'm not particularly a religious person, but I enjoy thinking about something bigger than me. And I'm sure you can hear my cat sneezing over there. And if you know me personally, you've heard that sound many times because my cat sneezes a lot and it's probably going to go on for a little bit longer. Okay, so sometimes I say the prayer of St. Francis in the morning. It's a Catholic prayer. The Dalai Lama once said that you should just keep the religion of your grandmother. That's what I did. I'm not really a Catholic, but my grandmother's religion is Catholic. And I love the prayer of St. Francis. It takes me out of myself and my needs and puts me in the zone of like, what can I be in service to today? And sometimes I ask this question that I heard comes from the Course in Miracles. And I'll say, oh, great mystery. What shall I do today? What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? And what would you have me say? And to whom? I never hear an answer, but I ask the question just to put my mind in the state of being open and receiving guidance from something that is outside of me. Tip number 5, develop self-trust. You could also say confidence. It can be difficult to trust yourself to make art if you do not have a track record of making art and releasing it. And you can't necessarily rely on the past, like, oh, I've done this before, I'll do it some more. But it can also be difficult to disregard the critical voices from our past that pop up in our minds a lot. Like, if someone you admired or adored or just who was important in your life at one point told you that you weren't capable, you don't have what it takes, they didn't like what you said, the way you sing isn't good enough, the way you dance isn't good enough. And I have talked to so many people in the last week who have been traumatized and scarred by their previous experiences in ballet, classical music, any kind of like Western classical training has put people through the ringer and has really honestly put them in a trauma response. And there is a lot to work through there. And that is a little bit beyond the scope of this talk. There's a lot of different ways to develop self-trust, but one way you can do it is by making promises to yourself and then keeping them. And then you're like, okay, I build my confidence and self-trust that way. And also by, deciding what the narrative is for you, writing it down on a piece of paper. And whenever those negative criticisms come into your head, the voices of another, replace it with your own voice and what you know is true about yourself. And have them ready. Have those statements at the ready. You could even put them onto a wall so that you don't have to dig, and you just, when you start to hear those negative voices, replace it with your own positive, encouraging thoughts about who you know who you are, and you're not going to let anyone else distract you from who you are. Tip number 6, just say yes. Just say yes. Especially if you're working with somebody else. Lately, when I've been making work with other people, making art with other people, I start the process and I say, you know what? This is what we're going to do today. Literally everything goes. I will not say no to any of your ideas, and I don't want to hear you say no to any of my ideas, okay? I want you to say yes to every single thing. Yes, and what about this? Yes, and what about this? And then we can edit it later. Separate the process of creating from editing. This is one of the most important things that I would like you to take out of this talk, is that when you're just making things, everything goes, anything goes. Do not judge it. Do not criticize it. Do not wonder if it belongs in what you're doing. It doesn't matter, because you don't want your critical, evaluating mind to be active at all. You can do that later. You can come back to what you made. You can take a video of it. You can write it down as a rough draft, and you can edit it. And you know what? Editing is like so much easier than creating sometimes. So just separate those processes and don't ever try to do them at the same time. Write a real true rough draft. Someone said to me a couple weeks ago, oh yeah, that's why they say write drunk, edit sober. And I'm not saying go get drunk before you make a dance, but I am saying that I like that statement and I get the point of it. So take that home. Create drunk, edit sober. Use the critical mind later, after you put some things on the page or on the stage. Number 7, enjoy the process without being overly concerned, or maybe even concerned at all, about the result. What's it going to look like when it's done? Who cares? Worry about that later. How are people going to receive this when I share it? Who cares? Worry about that later. And maybe don't ever worry about it. Just enjoy the process. Making things is fun. And if you don't feel that as a solo practitioner, then try making something with somebody else. Tap into that time when you were a kid on the playground making dances, or you with your sister or your brother in front of the dinner table being like, look what we made today. Just get into that zone where it's more about what you were doing during recess. You weren't really ever going to do that show and the talent show or that dance you made on TV or anything. You just wanted to have a good time during recess. So remember that. Have a good time with the process of the thing without really worrying that much about what's going to be the final product. And the last tip number 8, is to share what you create. I think it's important to get it out of there, because then you can develop that self-trust, that track record where you're like, I made this, I made that, and then you can say, you can stop saying, I'm not going to share things until they're perfect and amazing, because you're never going to get better at making things. You have to finish them, share them, and then the next thing you make is going to be closer to the vision you had in your head. Then you're going to share that, finish that, share that, and then the next thing you make is going to be even closer to the vision you had in your head. You don't get better at creating art by just not finishing your projects and not sharing them over and over again. You need to actually finish them, let them be, share them, and move on to the next thing. Just create, move on, release, release. The releasing is part of the artistic process. Okay, so if you enjoy talking about this stuff and you want to know a little bit more about my approach to creativity, to choreographic composition, to improvisation, specifically within the genre of belly dance, rock sharky, transcultural fusion, I am giving a training where I will share with you my 3-part framework for how I approach the entire art of belly dance and how I try within myself to make myself as brilliant of a belly dancer as I can be. And I would love to share that with you. You need to apply and be accepted to my online coaching program in order to get access to that training. You will go to thecohesioncollective.com, and I'll put that link in the caption of this video as well. I hope you enjoyed these tips. Please write below if any of these tips have worked out for you, or if you have any others to suggest. And I hope you have a beautiful day.